Hi, my name is Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm the president of the Michael Goldstein Institute. And today I want to talk a little bit about anarchy. So this is Bitcoin, an experiment in anarchism. And this presentation is dedicated to Ross Ulbricht. I implore you to learn more about his case and by visiting freeross.org, and there is plenty of places on there to help you donate. They could definitely use your money. There's also a QR code here in front of me. So a lot of people, Bitcoin has been increasing in size. We have a lot more people in this space, but with them comes a lot of ideological baggage. And I don't want to implicate any specific people, but there are a lot of ideas coming into the space where they don't want Bitcoin to be something radical. This is an example. This is a VC. I won't name names. You can look it up if you want. But they think that Bitcoin. A lot of people think it's a libertarian thing, but he's a Democrat and he voted for Obama, and he thinks that the Federal Reserve is an important function. I don't know how you can reconcile that with Bitcoin. Somehow he does. Then we have more people. The Bitcoin subreddit, which is a great place for Bitcoin discussion, is full of people who also have these feelings. If only the people that are Bitcoin were talking about its potential for good instead of how they need to overthrow all government and fiat. Missing, of course, the point that overthrowing all government and fiat is its potential for good. And there's also these ideas such as, the fact that you're a libertarian and like Bitcoins does not mean it was built by people who hate the government like you do. Which I would like to go into why that is completely false. So I'd like to take you through a history of some of the ideas that went into Bitcoin. So let's talk about the building blocks. The best place to probably start is back in 1976 with Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman, two cryptographers who came out with a paper called New Directions in Cryptography. And this paper talked about something new called public key cryptography, where instead of needing to share a key with both people, the two people can have their own sets of keys, where a public one allows people to send messages to them, and the private one that they keep to themselves can be used to decrypt it. And this allows people to set up secure channels of communication between each other where otherwise it wouldn't be able to exist before because of problems of key distribution, making sure that this secret between people can be shared. Another important thing is David Chaum, and he had two papers in the early 1980s. This one about untraceable electronic mail, where you could send email essentially anonymously. No one could find out where it came from or who it was going to. And also blind signatures for untraceable payments, which described how you could send basically digital cash. But it sets it up in a way where you can sign something with a digital signature, which verifies who it was sent to, and that's using that private key that you keep to yourself. It can do so in such a way where you don't even have to see what you're signing, but you can verify that you signed it. Kind of like if you put carbon paper within an envelope and then you sign the outside of it, the inside paper is signed, but you didn't actually see it. So these are just a couple really interesting ideas that came out late 70s, early 80s. And while they just seem, the cool cryptography stuff, they have specific implications. And that's where these guys came in, the cypherpunks. The cypherpunks were founded in 1992 by Eric Hughes, Timothy C. May, and John Gilmore. It was a group of guys that met up in Silicon Valley and talked about these cool new ideas in cryptography, but they also held a lot of ideals about online privacy and keeping yourself safe from government. And a great example would be Hughes' own Cypherpunks Manifesto, where he says, cypherpunks write code, which I'll get back to in a second, and we don't care if you don't approve of what we write, but we're going to write it in such a way that can be spread and not shut down. And these programs were because it was using this public key cryptography to set up anonymous ways of communicating, and doing so in a way that the government can't really do anything about it. And cypherpunks write code was an important maxim of the group. And they were basically saying, instead of just talking about these political ideals, we create software that makes it happen. But it was really Timothy May who saw these ideas and took them to their logical conclusions in terms of what they mean for society as a whole. Timothy May wrote the Crypto-Anarchist Manifesto the same year, and in it, he had this phrase which kind of sums up kind of like the market that he envisioned, which combined with emerging information markets, crypto-anarchy will create a liquid market for any and all material which can be put into words and pictures. And I actually slightly disagree with that because it's not even just words and pictures now, but physical goods. You can send 3D printable guns through the internet now. So he was imagining a world where any sort of information can be shared, and with this, we obviously need some way of, doing economic calculation and such. So he also wrote a great paper called Crypto-Anarchy and Virtual Communities, and in this he talks about how digital money is obviously something we need, but at this point in time it's not something that we really know how to do. We understand Chaumian blind cash. We know that we can do such a thing, but we don't really know how to implement it quite yet. He also wrote a very long paper, or kind of essay. It's a very bizarre style of writing, but the Cyphernomicon is the cypherpunk FAQ. And once again, he goes into how crypto has very specific social implications to the point where governments cannot really do anything about it. But along comes in 1998, ideas are starting to come about how we can actually create these pseudonymous or anonymous monies. And an important paper was by Wei Dai called B-Money. And this was released on the cypherpunk mailing list. And what's really interesting about this paper is that the first two paragraphs don't talk about how the money will actually work. What it started off with was him talking about why Timothy May's vision of anarchy is so interesting and important by creating a situation where the government is not, as he says, not temporarily destroyed, but permanently forbidden and permanently unnecessary. And he goes on to say, of course, until now we didn't really have the tools to make it, but money being one of the most important tools for a functioning economy, obviously, if we can create a way to have a digital money, we can have ways of creating these digital anarchies. And then he goes on to provide some ideas for protocols that could do such a thing, some of them mirroring what we now see in Bitcoin. Moving on, there was a great thinker, one of my favorites, Nick Szabo. And he took the idea of, he molded property theory with these ideas of cryptography to have a very full and rich social theory. In 1997, he wrote this paper in which he came up with basically the idea of smart contracts, which he showed by using computers to do what have traditionally been done by human minds through paper techniques instead of digital contracts. You can reduce the cost of law. You can also reduce the need for third parties. And third parties, as he describes in another important paper, you can call a third party what it really is, and that's a vulnerability. A trusted third party, mind you. So being able to move these things into the digital world makes it safer, cheaper, more secure, etc. He later, 1998, so this was the same year that B-Money came out, he wrote this paper, Secure Property Titles with Owner Authority. And I think this sentence kind of sums up what he was talking about. And while thugs can still take physical property by force, the continued existence of correct ownership records will remain a thorn in the side of usurping claimants. Now, how did he say we could, protect these property ownership claims in such a way that can protect it from these thugs? Well, he actually described a protocol for a distributed timestamp database, which today we use that with the Bitcoin blockchain. So this is one of the very first notions of a blockchain. And here he was describing that blockchain not because it's a cool way of doing payments, but because it provides a secure way to protect the property from these malicious third parties, especially that of government. Today, the government has a monopoly on the legal system, and because we have to trust them, we also have to trust them not to forge documents, not to change the history of property ownership. We have to trust them, and that is simply not a good security model. Later, he wrote a paper called Shelling Out, which I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in the Austrian theory of money. It brings in a lot of Austrian thought, but it also kind of deepens our ideas of money. And he quoted biologist Richard Dawkins, interestingly enough, money is a formal token of delayed reciprocal altruism. Now this, he was able to kind of whittle down money to its most abstract concept, which was sort of what we now call proof of work with Bitcoin, but a way of sacrificing your energies towards creating some good that has value simply to be able to reciprocate in an exchange. And then you can take that good and redeem it for another exchange elsewhere. Finally, an important one, BitGold, which might sound kind of familiar, and it actually described a protocol very similar to Bitcoin using a distributed database, creating mathematical puzzles, and solving those puzzles allows for issuance of money. Probably sounds pretty familiar. And doing this, once again, it reduces dependence on third parties, it securely stores value, and you can transfer and exchange with minimal trust in third parties. And then there was Bitcoin. So here we have had this history of ideas that questions the need for a trusted third party, and has pointed to the need to create such a money so that we can have freedom in this world, to create these digital anarchies, and Bitcoin is able to come along. And Satoshi himself understood that Bitcoin had this sort of libertarian properties to it. He said it's very attractive to the libertarian viewpoint if we can explain it properly. I'm better with code than with words, though. And he also mentions how while centralized systems such as Napster have been taken down, distributed systems do not have this same problem. They don't have as many risks of being shut down so easily, which is why distributed networks have been able to flourish so well. So I want to, I'm better with codes than with words. The code has very specific implications, and I'd like to get that in just a little bit, so remember that. I want to talk a little bit about crypto anarchy as a whole, though. So there's sort of the private law society model, kind of anarcho-capitalism, and crypto-anarchists recognize the state as an unjustifiable aggressor against person and property. It's a legal monopoly on force that's able to wield that force in ways that contradict, the rights of man. However, so the anarcho-capitalist vision, it sees the way of solving this problem. Like a better vision of the world would be one with competitive legal orders, where instead of having this one entity that's able to make all decisions, you can have a bunch of different people offering their services, and the market will get to choose based on which one offers it best, and they can provide the services of law, security, etc. The ones that so that there's not a monopoly aggressing. However, crypto anarchy is while it's not like a philosophy in itself, it's a great strategy, because what it does is gives this anarcho-capitalist vision a better security model. Because instead of relying on these third parties once again with a competitive legal order, you can use digital signatures and smart contracts and cryptographic protocols to create secure peer-to-peer legal orders, and that's what we're starting to see. That's really what Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin, as he was not very good at writing with words apparently, but he was with code. And with the code that Satoshi wrote, we can see some very specific properties that mimic this anarcho-capitalist vision of society and what the rights of man are. So first off, Bitcoin is completely voluntary. No one forces you to use it. You can enter the market as you wish. You can leave the market as you wish. It is completely voluntary. Furthermore, it mimics private property. Each Bitcoin is assigned to a specific private key, and only that private key is allowed to make use of those Bitcoins. And also, so that also mimics sort of the individual rights formulation of private property. There's only one key that can use it, or if you want to make larger agreements, you have to voluntarily enter them. There's no monopolization of money production, so the Federal Reserve is one of the biggest thorns in the sides of anarcho-capitalists and many other libertarians as well. But Bitcoin strictly prohibits this. The only way that there would be able to be monopolization was if there was only one person mining. But because of the Bitcoin protocol being as it is, anyone can enter that market. Anyone can voluntarily enter the protocol and start providing their own computational power. Smart contracts are enforced by protocol, so people can make these agreements with one another, and instead of having to go to a monopolist or even any kind of third party, the protocol itself is handling these. You set the rules of the protocol ahead of time, and it just works. And because of all of this, there is an exponential increase of cost of intervention. If the government is unable to force you to sign a message that sends Bitcoins to them, there's no way they can get the Bitcoins unless perhaps some rubber hose and cryptanalysis where they actually beat you with a rubber hose. But while this is possible, someone could come and beat you up for your keys. The cost of doing so increases greatly. They can't just go straight to JP Morgan Chase and say, oh, can we have all your money? We're going to do a bail-in. They can't do that. They have to be able to go to each and every individual. The state has finite resources, so there's a limit to how much they can actually get away with. So the cost of actually being able to force the protocol to do something that is against voluntary action is nearly impossible if the network is able to grow to a large enough size. So Satoshi could have been an NSA-backed totalitarian, but his protocol is strictly anarchist. He could have easily been paid by the government to create it, but he created something that the government itself cannot shut down. And the protocol itself is strictly anti-government in the sense that it does not allow for government. So with this, we can start to also imagine Bitcoin as the bedrock of agorist business models. So one of the best examples is the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road was, I'm sure as everyone here knows, an anonymous digital marketplace for anything and nearly everything. But it was also completely voluntary. People could get on and trade whatever goods they would like. It was anonymous, so you didn't have to supply your name, and no one did. All you had was perhaps a username at most. And it was violence-free. Allegations of murders aside, there was actually no way to commit violence against someone that you thought wronged you. If you had a dispute on the site, people would laugh if you wanted to say, oh, well, I'll come beat you up if you don't give me my money. Instead, the way it worked is you had an escrow system where the Dread Pirate Roberts, as third party, would hold on to money until both sides were happy with their agreement. And only then would money be transferred. And if there was a dispute, the Dread Pirate Roberts would handle it. And then from there, be able to decide where the money should go. However, they first off had to voluntarily agree to that transaction ahead of time, which is what libertarians have seen as the right business model for law. You create the contract ahead of time, and with all the possible contingencies. So you created a way where violence was out of the picture, and this was incredible. However, it still had a trusted third party, the Dread Pirate Roberts, the site itself, the one server, and that was able to be shut down. However, just as Napster was shut down, the market for file sharing did not go away. Just with that, with the Silk Road being shut down, the market for drugs surely did not go away. And now people are already thinking of ways to make the security model better and better protect anarchy. One of the best ways to do this coming in the future is with a protocol called Open Transactions. And Chris Odom, the creator of that, will be speaking later today. And also using an idea by Justice Ranvier called Lex Cryptographia, or cryptographic law. Here we can create a decentralized market and borderless law. So Open Transactions will soon feature a feature called the Bazaar, which is a digital marketplace. Any Open Transaction server can be set up. If you want to set one up yourself, you can. And you can start broadcasting advertisements for whatever kind of good you would like. And Lex Cryptographia is a set of ideas of setting up surety bonds, restitution, insurance, and general smart contracts to be able to cryptographically and securely lay out the rules for how funds should be distributed in the case of dispute. So if I'm selling a good, I can put up a bond of X amount, and if the buyer is not happy with the good, the cryptography has it set in place for a third party, an arbiter of our choice, also free market and competitive. You get to choose anyone ahead of time. They can decide the dispute and know where to send the money, but the only way it can be sent is by using the cryptography. You cannot run off with any funds. So this allows people to engage in a fully free market law on the internet with absolutely no regard for the lines in the sand created by the nation states. And like I said, so this allows for insurance and restitution, so people can put up this money in case, ahead of time, in case something goes off. And this also has the benefits of allowing people who would otherwise not have access to legal systems, those people finding themselves in markets that are not as trusted. Nigerian princes, for instance, have a hard time getting people to trust them on the internet, but they can put up a bond for the money transfers that they wish to do. Finally, there's also an idea of voting pools, which allows web services to be able to set up sort of an M of N contract among a group of services, so that if one of them goes down, well, it still takes a majority of them to be able to sign a broadcast to be able to go through with cryptography. So there's no single point of failure. A trusted third party, even on trusted web services, are completely gone. So once again, we're able to use cryptography to make better business models, better security models that better allow for anarchy. So my friends and I have started the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, and we're trying to learn from this history of cryptographic ideas so that we can fully understand where Bitcoin came from, the social movement of the crypto anarchists and the cypherpunks, so we can really see when these ideas are created and implemented, what are the ends that they're actually going for? Bitcoin was not made simply to have a better payment system and a better PayPal. It was created instead because people like Wei Dai, people like Timothy May and Nick Szabo, they wanted to create systems that could not be forged, changed through violent plunder or just any general malicious third party. We also want to do scholarship. We want to, take these ideas of having a decentralized, distributed timestamp database, having this public ledger, and find out what are the social implications of them. What can we learn about society? What, if this is implemented in a society, what are the necessary effects? For instance, with the removal of monopolization of money, there will be no such thing as a Federal Reserve anymore. And with no Federal Reserve, we no longer have a malicious entity able to print any amount of money they want to fund basically mass murder. This is important and revolutionary. And finally, we want to work to the future. Bitcoin is not the beginning, it's not the end. It's part of a larger move to use cryptography to secure anarchy in our world. And after all, cypherpunks write code. So you can visit us at nakamotoinstitute.org. Most of the papers that I mentioned today are available, some not because of intellectual monopoly restrictions, but Google can be your friend if you still want to read those. So just end with a couple quotes. Bitcoin is a single package. Either it completely fails or it turns all people into wealthy, peaceful anarchists. And as Timothy May said, arise, you have nothing to lose but your barbed wire fences. So Bitcoin is inherently anarchist. The properties of it are anarchist. And for that, you should thank it. And if you use Bitcoin, you are buying into anarchy and losing your faith in government. And for that, you should thank yourself. So thank you.